news in terms of Russia. There's very important materials which come out of Russia, which is used in the manufacture of semiconductors. Is that important? So, does that change your view on semiconductors? Are you, taking that down, pushing more into equipment, IT services? Is there other sources that the semiconductor factories are using? So what are the effects on that with Russia being closed off?
Yeah, so there was a worry a few days ago about supplies of neon and palladium, both of which are supplied from, I think, Russia and Ukraine, and they're both relatively rare, relatively important materials for certain types of sensors and semiconductors. I think those worries are massively overblown, so it appears that neon is actually also a byproduct of various industrial processes. There's no particular shortage, and it is in the air around us, so it's necessary you just extract from the air. The industrial gas companies can do that for us. And palladium, likewise, there are other sources of it. So it's described as a rare earth metal, but rare earth metals aren't particularly rare. They're all over the world. It's a question of whether they're processed. Most of them are processed, or have been in recent years in China. But after China refused to supply rare earth metals to Japan for a period, everyone in the world has been looking for alternative sources and building up the refining processes around the world. So I think that's less of an issue than it would have been a few years ago, and it's not an insuperable issue. And of course, the people who get the rare material, the things in short supply, are the ones that can make the most value out of it, because they'll pay more relative to the total cost. Even if the cost of palladium quadruples, if it's only 1% of the total cost before, you've got an increase of 3% in the cost. So for the most valuable products, that's worth it. You just pay 4 times as much. And the people really that make stuff that isn't as valuable, isn't as profitable, uses less palladium or more palladium versus the cost, the value of the product, they will lose out. So the market will find the most efficient uses for that rare resource. And the less useful uses are probably the ones outside semiconductors, because semiconductors are generally inherently extremely profitable. So I think the market finds its way through, and I'm not particularly worried about that. And I think also people have seen this coming. So TSMC, I understand, built up a 6-month supply of palladium in advance, so they should be able to continue to restock that, at least for now, so I don't think it's a major issue there.
Yeah, and I suppose less materials means less semiconductors, which again pushes the price up. We've seen that in the last couple of years with supply and demand. So I don't think it's the fundamentals of how important semiconductors are.
That hasn't changed. So, and each one of those missiles being fired around the world is not a nice thing to think about, but lots of them have got semiconductors, and they've just all gone poof. So there'll be demand there for military uses of semiconductors on both sides, I suspect. And something that has apparently been shown is just how strong the West is, in this case against Russia. So in terms of sanctions, restriction materials, restriction on banking and so on and so forth. And I suspect that Beijing is looking at this very hard, because that gives them some indication of how strong the effect of sanctions will be against them if they decided to invade Taiwan. And I suspect the lesson they're taking at the moment is that they're not ready to do that. The effect of those sanctions will be too strong, because it is quite clear that the Chinese alternatives to, in particular, semiconductor production and semiconductor equipment are simply not good enough. They are nowhere near competing with the Western alternatives. So at present, if they invaded Taiwan, their technology industry would come to a complete halt. So, as would ours, to be honest. So, a large chunk of our supplies of advanced semiconductors come from Taiwan. So everybody would have a horrific time. But China, if it lost access to leading-edge semiconductor technology, its technology industry really does grind to a complete halt. And we are a very, very long way from that being true.